Settings, defaults, device. There we go. Bloody thing. Unflippin' believable. Windows, and it's updating crap on me. Oh, come on. And yeah, never let Windows update. It changes all your bloody settings. Sound settings. Quick. Changed all my fancy devices. Yeah, okay. All right. Testing 1, 2. There we go. Okay, I think we'll have a little bit of music to carry us through to showtime. And some of my bad singing. Nobody here anyway. Oh, yeah. Don't claim to know your story, don't even have my own. In search for glory, going with them sacred rules of old. They went missing down Highway 49. Devils at the crossroads, sitting doing time. Preacher man discovered, passed down from saint to sage, like a kind-hearted lover who's been lost on this stage. Went missing down Highway 49. Devils at the crossroads, sitting doing time. Not saying they're right or wrong. I ain't no Texan dancer. Well, move it right along. We're missing down Highway 49. Devils at the crossroads, sitting doing time. Chunky and the chigger just seen who done the crime. Captain pulled the trigger, guess who's doing time? They went missing down Highway 49. Devils at the crossroads, is he yours or is he mine? Definitely mine. Nailed it. Story, don't even have my own. In our search for glory, gone with them sacred rules of old. We're missing down Highway 49. Devils at the crossroads, sitting doing time. Devils at the crossroads, jokers doing fine. Just sitting doing time. Yeah, there we go. All right, well, got somebody listening. Welcome to the show, and let's take it to the live screen. Off just a little bit. There we go. All fixed. All right. Well, got a show for you. Bit of a show. Maybe it's a show. It's supposed to be a meetup, or maybe it is the weekly Bible study show. And we are going to be doing some readings from the book of Revelation today. saying that I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, and what thou seest, write in a book, and send it unto the 7 churches which are in Asia, unto Ephesus, and unto Samaria, and unto Pergamos, and unto... that's not it. Sorry, wrong show. That's a show I do another time. But since there's really nobody here listening at the moment, at least I'm not sure if that's the usual Google bot that shows it's listening, or if it is an actual listener. And I'm going to give you a presentation here. I'm going to give a few minutes here, as usual, to see if anyone actually shows up for the presentation. And I just don't want to be too premature on it. And I'll try to avoid doing things like squirrel, wandering off and random stuff. No, you'll have to listen to the podcast for all the other sound effects. But we are going to be presenting to you, me, the mouse in my pocket. No, the mouse escaped. All right, me. I'm going to be presenting to you a bit about when you're going to face migrating your website from one host to another. The issues, some of the pitfalls, some of the things you might face along the way. So let's give it a couple of things. Oh, we do have somebody live there. Hey, George, how you doing? Thanks for popping in. Haven't really begun yet. I'm giving it a couple of minutes to see if other people actually show up, or if it might just be me, you, and the Google bot who monitors the traffic to make sure everything's going good. Because there's always at least one person here, and it's the Google bot. I'm certain of it. I'm making sure I don't do copyright violations or say some of those horrible things that get videos banned, such as the Wuhan flu COVID-19 disease. Oh, wait, damn, that's going to get banned. Oh, well, say lovey. So the presentation will be about what you can face and what you might be dealing with when migrating from one host to another, especially for WordPress websites. Some of the issues that might be faced along the way. Maybe a few people will come back and watch this later. But now that I've given it, we're only 3 minutes in, so let's give it another 2 minutes before I actually reel into the presentation. And feel free, if you're in there, feel free to enter comments in, ask me questions. I do look at the comments as I'm going through here. I'm not an overly efficient typer, so I won't type back any comments, but I will respond to them as I see them come in. And we shall see how we get through this stuff, and see if I can bring up a few articles that I've picked out from the web, some select articles about what people can look at and look for, and articles that may or may not help with the moves, along with the tips and information that I will kick out from this. Shouldn't be too long a presentation, probably half an hour tops. It's not like a normal meeting room where I get a few people and usually get a good rapport going. So let's hope everyone's enjoying themselves this evening. And I got hiccups after dinner. Oh, wait, no, that's not the booze. I haven't started drinking the booze yet. But I do have my shot, my tequila shot for when I'm done. It sits on my desk throughout every show I do, and I get to drink it when I'm finished a show. That's my tequila shot for when it's completed. And for those of you that might, well, actually, this isn't going out into my podcast feed. This is just strictly going out to YouTube. So you will have seen that in a little picture in the corner of me. There it is. There's me now, because I'm on a 30-second delay. All right, let's see what we got. Let's take this thing on the road and get it off and going. I think just for fun, though, we will kick it off with the intro for WP Plugins, A to Z. WordPress. It's the most popular content management and website solution on the internet. And with over 80,000 plugins to choose from, how do you separate the junk from the gems? Join us for a weekly, unrehearsed conversation about the latest and greatest in WordPress plugins. This is WordPress Plugins from A to Z. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be hiding out there on the globe today. Coming to you direct from the Brewery Overlook in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. I'm John Overall, and I am doing a presentation here this evening about migrating and moving your WordPress website from one host to another, some of the pitfalls you might encounter along the way, and all the other little bits and pieces that may cause you grief and headaches and just plainly make your life miserable while you're doing this. Well, we'll start off a little bit here for, of course, first you're looking at migrating your WordPress website from one host to another. Oftentimes can seem like a very simple task, or it can be full of more headaches than you would care to admit. And many people don't do this themselves. A lot of hosting companies out there offer painless, free migration. I know myself from my hosting business, I will offer free migration from time to time. I'll do free migration in particular if I'm able to pull them off of a cPanel hosting that is actually still doing backups. If I have to do a manual retrieval of everything, there's usually a charge involved because it does take time. And this is the problem nowadays. One of the first things you're going to be dealing with when you're migrating from one host to another is that what had been for the last decade, actually the last 2 decades. I've been running my hosting service now for 21 years. 1999, I brought my first server online. And in that 21 years, I've been using cPanel. And it became the industry standard for web hosting dashboards. And the reason it became the standard, of course, was because it was relatively inexpensive for a license, and you could put unlimited a number of websites under that one license for one server. Well, last year, I don't remember, somewhere late last year, summertime, early fall, cPanel was bought up by not a marketing company, an investment company, and all of a sudden the bean counters got a hold of it, and the bean counters looked at a company that was already making a significant profit, doing very well, and went, wait a minute, we can improve this profit dramatically more. So what did they do? They decided to change the licensing agreement for cPanel, and they moved it from unlimited licenses to having that it had to have a maximum, as a tiered licensing. Your first 100 sites cost you $30. Your next 100 cost you 60. After that, it goes up exponentially. It ended up with many hosting companies that put thousands of servers on one host under one cPanel license. Everybody got a cPanel. Went from their cost being about $25 or $30 a month for that cPanel license to suddenly costing them thousands of dollars. And so what's happened is many hosting companies have opted out of using cPanel, and they've started to design and create their own dashboard interfaces. And if you're still on companies such as, say, SiteGround, who's changing out for this, who else is there? SiteGround, HostGator, I think they do. DreamHost never really used cPanel. They did eventually move to cPanel after they realized that their invention of the wheel didn't work very well. SiteGround is now trying to reinvent the wheel again. And so it's starting to create a fracturing in the system again. So getting from one hosting provider to another has gone from relatively easy and straightforward to now it's going to become a difficult situation. So you're going to want to investigate what you're looking at for dealing with that migration from one host to another. So your first area in order of business in here is to start looking at your cPanel information and see what kind of cPanel it is. Or, well, I say cPanel, I mean control panel. cPanel is actually a name of a company, and being as, cPanel is the name of a company, you don't want to, I'm trying to differentiate between cPanel and all the other control panels out there. There's Plesk, there's Home Built, there's a couple of other ones that are aftermarkets now that are trying to become up-and-comers to replace cPanel for those that are abandoning it. I myself, in my own hosting business, I've opted not to abandon cPanel, but I never really have to worry because I'm always the lowest tier because I max out my servers at 100 clients maximum, and that's the maximum I will allow on a server is 100 clients port to allow the server to perform at its maximum ability. Because then in those 100 client mix, there's going to be heavy users and light users, and there's going to be up and down. That brings me to the next component you're going to be looking at is what kind of hosting are you going to be moving from and moving to? Chances are the hosting you're moving from is on shared hosting. Virtually everyone is using shared hosting unless they've got very specific needs. And shared hosting to shared hosting, usually not a big deal. If you're moving from a major company such as DreamHost or Bluehost or Green Geeks or someone else, you're going to be moving from a shared hosting environment that's got hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of websites on a server, and you'll just by moving to a host that has a lower use server, you'll get some dramatic improvements in speed. But that's not the only type of hosting that's available. If you've got a website you started a couple of years ago, maybe it was an e-commerce, it got a slight bit of traffic, now it's increasing. You've probably run into the problems if you were on someone, we're going to pick on Bluehost because, they're one of my most irritating ones I have to move someone from. Bluehost and SiteGround. Well, SiteGround's bad too. But usually what happens is if you're on Bluehost or someone such as Bluehost, you move from Bluehost. Or if you're on Bluehost, you get yourself a little website, you put up an e-commerce site on it, it's got a few products, you're doing okay, you're moving along. All of a sudden you start picking up speed. Maybe you're selling a few more things. People are visiting your site a bit more. It starts using more and more resources. All of a sudden you start getting out of resource error notices. Your server company sends you an email that says, we're going to shut you down unless you fix such and such. You used X amount of CPU cycles, or you've hit X amount of EndNote cycles. And we'll talk a bit about those in a little bit. And what do? You contact them up and say, well, what can we do to fix this? Well, first off, they tell you, well, let's sell you a larger package. We'll move you up to our next tiered package for shared hosting. And what I've run into, and this has happened several times, they start off with their $5 a month package. Now they're at the $10 a month package. Oftentimes, by the time they get to me, they're getting ready to be bumped up to the $35 a month package that Bluehost offers them, which still doesn't give nearly the same amount of resources and space and everything else that I give for $35. And of course, I've seen people at $35 a month, all of a sudden they're sold and they say, oh, you've hit our max shared hosting package. Now you need a dedicated, or not a dedicated, but a virtual host package. And what is a virtual host package? A virtual host package is something that is very useful for people that's websites are growing and expanding. That virtual host package gives you more resources. What's happening now is you're sharing a server with, I have no idea how many other people they take a server and chunk it out into virtual hosts. I hope it's not a whole lot, but I'm willing to bet that they push the limits on it. They might, I'm willing to bet, I don't know this for absolute, this is pure speculation, but I'm willing to bet they probably virtual host out a server for upwards of 50 or 100 clients on a virtual host server. And on a server that's only got 30 or 60 gigs of RAM, and they virtual host that out, that's a pretty good chunk of RAM that's being shared about or supposedly dedicated to you. So virtual host is what it's supposed to do, is it's supposed to take the total server configuration and you buy a chunk of it. Maybe the chunk you buy has 6 gigs of RAM and 800 gigs of space, and these are really low numbers, but it's just the point being is that it's a limitation. And you are still at the mercy of whoever else you're sharing that virtual environment with. While your resources are dedicated to you, the bandwidth and other things are not dedicated to you because they still share the same port to that server for sending its data in and out of the server. So if you get on a virtual host with someone who's got a really busy website that's maybe getting 100,000 of visits a day, that could be a problem why you have a slow website on a virtual host. And I've run into that problem too on helping people out. Now, also, there's a few people on the line now. Thanks everyone for joining us. Feel free at any point in time is to leave a chat in the chat window, and I will answer your questions as I go. It's the best way to do it. I can see the chat window in one of my other screens over here. And yeah, that's about the only way I can really interact on this. Unfortunately, there's no direct voice interaction, and my typing skills, while they're okay, they're not that great for me to be doing talking, chatting, looking at all the other monitors on my desktop. So back to what's the next level of item you need once you get beyond virtual host? Well, there's the other one that everyone tries to convince you of is the most fantastic thing out there, and that's cloud hosting. And cloud hosting, well, this one here, I've attempted once to set up a cloud service just to see what it was, and I realized it just wasn't worth it. Supposedly it's faster, and it might be. You're scalable, and yes, it is scalable. The one I worked with, we had to scale it up and down, but the cost can suddenly skyrocket if you have to scale it up suddenly and then scale it back down. In other words, add quick memory because you suddenly got hit with traffic. The other problem with the cloud is, well, it's just somebody else's computer. That's really all it is. There is no cloud. It's just someone else's computer, just like a server. The cloud is still servers in different areas, and they run the data across multiple servers or multiple machines, and you get a dedicated amount of space. One of the big problems with cloud hosting is that if you have very specific needs, you do not have direct access to the server for it. You get no root access to the server for making customizations for custom software or anything along that lines. So if you're in need of that, probably not the best thing. But many, many applications are run on cloud servers. And a lot of your big ones are run on cloud servers, but there's still a root product somewhere else running everything. Then there is, managed WordPress hosting. And managed WordPress hosting has become very, very popular. And while I don't really have a lot bad to say about managed hosting, it is really good in theory. And for a vast number of people that have a WordPress website, managed hosting might be the perfect system for you. The biggest problem I've encountered with most managed hosting is that at a certain point, it gets really super expensive. You think of the two biggest ones, WP Engine, I think it is, WP Engine, I can't remember the newcomer to the field, is they charge you by the number of visits to your website. And even bots often get charged in that visit, and you can get suddenly slammed with bots, and you can get billed a mass amount of traffic for traffic that wasn't even humans. While if you argue it, they'll often give you credits for it and other things. It still suddenly can get real expensive. I've known one or two people that were on managed hosting, and 1 month they suddenly got a $160 bill. It's like, what's it? Well, you exceeded all your traffic. Here's where your traffic was for this month. And they didn't have logs to know what that traffic was. They had to take the host at their word for it. So it's a problem with it. The other problem with managed hosting is almost all managed hosting has limitations on plugins that can be used on their sites. In some cases, very strict limitations. You don't have the same freedoms you would have in a shared hosting environment where you handle everything and you have total freedoms to do it. So it may not be what you're looking for. The final one here is dedicated server hosting. And dedicated server hosting is not something for everyone. Dedicated server is where you go lease a server from a server company such as OVH. And OVH is a really good company. I've been leasing my servers from them for about 4 years now. Previous to them, I was using Dedicated Solutions, a company out of the States. One of the reasons I ended up at OVH is they offer Canadian servers located over in Quebec. The servers are in Quebec. And they're really good, high-quality servers in an excellent data center. But with a dedicated server, you have to manage everything, or you have to hire people to manage it for you. And that can get expensive when you're dealing with getting a server ready. Just prepping up a server to be able to accept clients on it and deliver websites, I think the last one I did about a month ago, I brought a new one online, and I think the total hours was somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 hours to have it all completely configured, secured, dialed in, software installed, monitoring installed, firewalls installed, all the things necessary for a server that was going to be secure and fast. And that takes time. Then it also takes, I have to monitor the servers, keep an eye on it. I have a tech support team that I paid for 24 hours, 24/7 service support. Those are the things you need when you have your own dedicated server. All your responsibility. Then you can do anything you want. Sky's the limit. You can have anything you want on those servers. So those are the type of servers you need. And so what are you looking at when you're going to move? So we'll bring that back around to when you're moving. As I said, for the most part, you're going to be moving from a shared hosting environment to a shared hosting environment. And even managed WordPress is a shared host environment. It's just less headache for you. Another one is costs. How much are your costs? Are you trying to lower your costs? Well, if you lower your costs, you're going to get less service. So you have to keep that in mind. The cheaper it is, generally the worse the hosting is. Now, the other thing you're going to want to do is, if you're moving, what was the reason you're moving? Was the company you're moving from very piss poor with their customer support? You had issues, you reached out to them, they didn't contact you back for days. When they did contact you back, they contact you back with something useless. Was there a sudden problem on the server you were on? Has that server been hacked and then the hosting company's been unable to help you get restored? Now, granted, that's not the hosting service's responsibility to repair or fix your website after a hack, and especially if the hack wasn't the fault of the server, which 99.9% of the time, it's not the fault of the server. Let's remove 0.9 here. Let's say 99% of the time, because there is a percentage where it is the fault of the server. And I've seen that in hosting companies, which I will not name. So what you're looking at is if there was a problem with it. Has the site been hacked, or is it just something you need them to, maybe you've run into a WordPress plugin you want to update, but your plugin says it will not work with PHP 7.0 or 7.1, or in some instances, it's still, I know this is going to sound really weird, but there's still some hosting servers out there that haven't advanced past PHP 5.6. Now, many of them are still using 7.1, which has been abandoned now, and the latest and greatest is 7.4. But this is, did you try to install a plugin that says I require to use PHP 7.3 and up? Well, you go to your host and they only have 7.2. So you reach out to your host and say, are you going to install 7.3? And the host goes, oh, we're going to get to it eventually. And that's the problem. You've got software that you might need that the host is responsible for getting on there, but the host doesn't have to have that stuff on there. They got to provide certain minimals is what they'll say. And their minimal can be pretty much anything they want. It exactly is anything they want. So is that the reason you're moving? Or is the reason you're moving cost? You're trying to, or the costs weren't very good. I find that most of the time when I'm moving someone from another hosting provider to my service, the biggest reason is the lack of speed and functionality on that host. They're having troubles with it. They aren't getting decent response. The second biggest thing I find is a lack of support. And so that's what you're looking for, is like, will you get the support when you go to the new hosting company? Now, there are hosting companies out there. Some of them are great. They provide fantastic hosting. I don't have their names at the top of my head. There's 2 or 3 that I have heard of in the last few years. Pretty much not anyone that I make mention of here this evening. Most of them are problematic. The other reason they're moving is suddenly they've hit these usage caps on their websites. And the usage caps, this goes along with what you're dealing with when you're getting shared hosting. Many of these hosting companies say unlimited bandwidth, unlimited storage space, and that's all anyone thinks about looking at. But unlimited doesn't mean unlimited. So everyone wants to move. And when you're moving, you want to move from a hosting company that is not going to stick unnecessary limits on what you can do. One of the big ones I see a lot is you've exceeded your EndNode usage. And EndNodes, for those that don't know, an EndNode is a file storage marker on the hard drive. The hard drive has an index on the hard drive that tells it where each and every bit of data on that hard drive is stored. And that index has a maximum capacity. And it's supposed to be a capacity for every spot on the drive that can store it. And the EndNodes can run out before the storage space runs out. At least that's what I'm told. But the problem with EndNodes is WordPress uses a lot of these because a 1 meg file takes one EndNode. A 3 gigabyte file takes one EndNode. So storage is irrelevant to this. EndNodes is what's really relevant. With WordPress, you upload one image to WordPress, and depending on your theme, it will create an additional 5 to 30 images. That's now 1 to 30 EndNodes being used. So it's real quick and easy for people to max out on their EndNodes. The other one that usually hits, and this is often a biggie, is CPU time and CPU cycles. And this is a real big one. And memory, CPU cycles and memory. So you're looking at a host that isn't going to limit you. Or at least if you do hit limits, that they're reasonable limits, not what I see on many of these hosting providers. It's usually an unreasonable limit, at least from my perspective. You know, of course, limits have to be maintained. You can't have unlimited anything. There's no such thing. I mean, we don't have unlimited resources on the planet. You can't have unlimited resources on a server. So this is where you're going with where you're going is why are you moving? Once you've determined your move, now you want to move. So what kind of problems are you going to face when you move? How do you get the website moved? Are you moving just your website, or are you moving your website and email? Is because there's a big difference between them. I really enjoy the sites where I only have to move their website and they've been doing all their email through Gmail or some other provider. Because one of the big problems is hosting, and even my hosting service, I can't guarantee delivery of email from my servers anymore. It's a near impossibility unless you have mega dollars to pay the extraction, blackmail, the protection racket fees to all of the blacklists out there. You have to pay them a fee to get your IP address in their whitelists. And it's an expensive racket now. And the small guy can't afford that racket anymore. I still manage to get through most of the time. I work hard to keep my IPs clean and off any blacklists. But every once in a while it happens. You know, somebody's site gets hacked and all of a sudden a bunch of spam gets sent from it. And all it takes is 2 or 3 items of spam landing in a spam trap somewhere, and poof, instantly I'm on a blacklist, and it takes me days to get off that list because I have to go file claims and request be removed. They have to check into me, check my server, etc. It's a nightmare. So anyway, if your email is not tied to your website, it's a real easy move because now all you're moving is files in a database. But if your email is tied to it, like you're getting emails at yourdomain.com, moving that can be very difficult unless, of course, you're on a cPanel server that is actually using cPanel and allows a backup to be made through cPanel. Because that cPanel backup, if you make a cPanel backup, that backup backs up everything in your hosting account. It backs up your SSL certificates, it backs up your email, it backs up temp files, it backs up everything. The entire 9 yards, all your databases, all in one nice smooth package. And with that file, you can go to any other cPanel hosting provider. They can take that file, upload it to their server, hit a button, restore. Instantly, your site is restored to exactly what it was when that backup was created. So that is why I don't charge for moving from a cPanel website to my servers. But when you're dealing with someone such as Bluehost or now SiteGround, they don't have cPanel or on all their servers. Bluehost doesn't have it on all their servers, but they have the backup is turned off on the cPanel servers for Bluehost. They charge you a premium for a backup, which isn't a good quality cPanel backup. You have to request it from them, and they charge you a fee to get that. And the ones that I have gotten in the past haven't always been 100% complete, and they didn't always reinstall correctly. What I've had to do with like Bluehost and now SiteGround is I have to log in via FTP, manually FTP down all the files, manually FTP down and bring down the other files needed, such as email and SSL certificates, and et cetera, et cetera. And then it has to be manually reinstalled on the new server and then manually connected everything back up. It takes a whole lot extra work. File transfer time aside, I never charge people for file transfer time. I charge them for actual time. I am actually at a keyboard typing, working, moving, doing things, not waiting for 10 gigabytes of files to download or upload. Download's pretty quick. It's always upload. So this is why you're going to be faced with how are you going to move your site. Now there are plugins for WordPress to say package up your WordPress site, move it with ease. Well, that's great. They work relatively well, I should say. They sometimes work flawlessly, sometimes not so flawlessly. The problem encountered with those plugins that are used to package up your WordPress site, and this only moves your WordPress site. It does not move anything else. If you have a WordPress website, and I see lots of them like this, they have additional folders in that site where they have other files that refer to other things. Maybe they have a PDF folder that's not in the uploads directory. Maybe there's some other things that are done with the website in combination with WordPress. So those are another aside. If you're using a plugin to move your WordPress website, the problem you can run into with the plugins is it won't package your WordPress website properly or completely, or if it does complete it, well, my server will handle it. But the reason it doesn't always complete it is you're on a shared hosting environment, and sometimes there's a limit on how long a PHP program can run to do something. And if you happen to have a medium-large to a large WordPress website, it can take 5 minutes or more of packaging things up before it creates a zip file that you can then download and move. And sometimes it'll crash partway through it and create only a partial file that's incomplete, missing lots of data. And this happens a lot when using plugins to move a WordPress website. There's other plugins, like I have used WP Manage DB, which is a professional plugin which allows you to set up on one website on a server and set it up on another, and then file across and pull the files across. And that sometimes works, but then again, you're faced with the problems of the connections, how long PHP programs can run. There's a whole lot of variables in there. Getting that stuff can sometimes be problematic. I've seen it problematic a lot. So it's the packaging and the restore of it all is the problem. The restoration can sometimes be a problem. If something goes wrong in the restoration of your WordPress website, it won't install. You'll get half installed, it'll break, it will cease to function, you'll have to start all over again. These are the problems that get faced when moving a WordPress website. So, what else are you looking for when you're going to move to? What other issues are you going to face? Well, the other issues you might face is, are you moving a website to a company that is not giving away free SSL certificates? And there's still a few hosting providers out there, GoDaddy comes to mind, where they don't give you a free SSL certificate, and they charge you for that. They're getting slightly better by giving away one SSL certificate for a website, but if you've got multiple websites under the same account, you got to pay for all the other ones. So it's a handoff for what GoDaddy does. They charge very well for everything they do. So the lack of an SSL certificates on hosting providers is still there. Not every hosting provider is giving them away, which is surprising because there's no reason today for them to not give away an SSL certificate. They're 100% free, and on a cPanel server, they're automatically installed. So you've got other issues that can happen. Customizations for your site. If you've got customizations that are needed, like I've had it happen on my servers where a client starts doing something unique, they run into an issue, they need a special piece of software, and I look at it and say, okay, it actually adds value to the rest of the server. I go ahead and add it. The problem with a major company that's got thousands of websites on a server, they make one change to the server, it can impact so many other websites out there and create problems. So when you're dealing with someone who's a little smaller but a little more direct, they can be a little more creative and allow for more expansion on what you want to do on your website. Let's see, where else am I going? I think that's we covered moving, covered the issues around using plugins. So I don't have any. I've did some moves recently, and what did I encounter in the moves I had recently? Okay, the biggest thing that happens in a move on a website is understanding that once you move your website and your domain, that you don't want to be doing any updates. You don't want to be doing any updates to your website for a 72-hour period. Whenever I'm moving a client, whether it's to me or to another host, doesn't matter. What I do is I tell them a day before the move, I say, make no changes from now until 48 hours after I've moved you. In other words, I'll tell them, I'll say, once I've moved you and I tell you it's all moved and the DNS has changed, don't make any changes for 48 hours. You want to give the internet time to catch up to your move. It's kind of like moving to a new apartment or a new house. Your mail gets lost. You've still got mail going to the old address, and it takes time for that mail to catch up to you. Granted, the internet's not as slow as Canada Post, but the point is there. So George has something here. FileZilla to move files and SQL statements to export, import database, and update URLs in the database. Okay, this is something really excellent. I'm glad you brought that to my mind. Okay, I've used FileZilla. I use FileZilla exclusively with my FTP, and I do use it a lot for moving hosting clients, especially when I can't do it nice and smooth. So I use FileZilla to move all the files. The database itself, I don't use SQL statements to export and import. What I do, well, I guess it is sort of an SQL statement, but I go to phpMyAdmin, and phpMyAdmin is usually available on every server no matter what their control panel is. There's still phpMyAdmin. It's the standard interface for interfacing with MySQL. So you go into phpMyAdmin and use that to just export out the entire database as a zip file. And then when you get to your new host, you create the database, go into that database through phpMyAdmin, and then import the zip file that you exported from the other one. And unless there was a problem or you hit the wrong button when you exported the old one, it'll import perfectly fine. And that works very well across all levels of MySQL, because we now have, I think, 3-4 different levels of MySQL living out there. We have MySQL 5, which is still out and about. I don't think they had us briefly. I think there was a 7, and it still exists. The other one now is Maria, which is MySQL 10. Somewhere along the line, they skipped a whole bunch of numbers. But Maria is the current MySQL database service, and it's very excellent. And I've exported from MySQL 5 and imported directly into Maria. I've exported from Maria and imported into a MySQL 5. So the databases are still relatively compatible, even with all the changes along the way. So that's the best way to go about doing that, is using the PHP MyAdmin to import and export the database. And FileZilla, absolutely, for moving all your files. It's free. It does a fairly good job, except when they occasionally screw it up during an update. That's why I don't do updates now until I'm pretty much forced to for most programs. I wait until they cram it down my throat, because I've had too many times where, oh, a new update, update it, all of a sudden it's broken stuff on me. And it's like, I can't reverse it. I'm stuck with it. And I have to deal with it. It's like, I think I did an update one time on FileZilla, and all of a sudden I had troubles connecting, and it wouldn't properly upload files. And when I looked up, oh yeah, they had an error. It took them a few days to fix it, but the problem occurs. Update errors occur. So yeah, FileZilla and PHP MyAdmin. You can use statements. Now, this is another thing you can do along the ways, is that once you've imported your new database, this is a point too, if you're moving to a new server, where you can also do other changes. Once you're logged in, you can use a plugin called Better Search and Replace, and you can use that to go in there and update URLs. It's an excellent plugin. I've been using it for years. And if you're really comfortable in the PHP MyAdmin, you can get the SQL statements to do the updates of the URLs. But like I said, I usually just import it, then I log into the WordPress website, make sure it's functioning, and then I use Better Search and Replace inside WordPress to do that for me, because it does it just as fast as the SQL statements, and I can do it from a user interface database, which unfortunately I'm a little more comfortable in. Like, I don't overly enjoy, well, I'm not overly good at writing the SQL statements. I usually get help with writing the statements when I need them done. So I really don't have a whole lot more than that. Is there anyone got any questions for me on this and what it can face when using your WordPress website, moving your WordPress website? Problems you might have faced, issues. No? Okay. Let's see if I could think of anything else that has popped in my head. That pretty much covers for my notes. Let's see what else I've got here. No. No slides from it. No, nothing. Just a basic presentation, a conversation, and a discussion. I hate to think about what else have I got. That's pretty much it. That's all I've got for you, folks. If you don't have any questions, nobody has any questions for me to drop into the comments, we can wrap this up and let her go. Short presentation. Appreciate people taking the time out to come join me for this. It's much appreciated. Saw at one point we hit up to 6 people. A couple popped out, probably due to my, I don't know, my doing one of those things that just like, well, okay, it's not talking about exactly what I want to hear, so off they go. What changes to WP config? Should be 0 changes to WP. Oh, there is one. If you're moving from one hosting provider to another, and you're having to create a new database, you're not able to do it with a direct import either through using a plugin or through using a cPanel export, and you've created a new database, you will have to go into the cPanel and set up, change out the, not cPanel, go into the WP config and change the information there for the database username and password and user. So you've got 3 settings in there. It's the database user, database username, and the database password, all contained in your WP config file. So you'll have to update that information on the new server with that. Otherwise, you'll load up your website and it says database cannot be found, unable to connect to database. And that's usually your first big clue that you forgot to change that information. So other than that, I can't really think of anything else that I automatically do. Nothing else generally needs changed in there. So yeah, thank you, George. I appreciate that. I forgot all about that item. Problem is we do things automatically when you get used to moving things around and migrating websites. You have things that are done automatically, and you don't write them down, and it's, unless somebody reminds you when you're trying to present it, you forget about that information. I just love the 30-second delay on this. It's so entertaining. Look over at the studio, watch myself saying and doing things after I've already said them. All right, well, I think I'll wrap it up. People are dropping off. And any other last minute questions? I'll give it the usual minute or so for people to respond, because I am on a 30-second delay. It's Google's idea, not mine. Personally, I'd let it go perfectly live. I don't really care what goes to it. But the 30-second delay is for those that route this stuff through another spot and they have someone who bleeps out when someone has a bad word slip, which I don't generally do in this kind of presentation, but in some of my other presentations or other things I do online, absolutely. I try to maintain a certain level of professionalism when I'm doing professional stuff. Alrighty, folks. I greatly appreciate you all taking your time to come by here and listen. I'm going to play my outro music on here for those of you that start to catch the outro music. If you got comments and you want me to keep chatting during the outgoing credits for the show, leave the comments and I will continue after the comments. All right, so thank you all very much. I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to let my girl take us on out of here.
Reminders for the show. All show notes can be found at wppluginsa2z.com. And while you're there, subscribe to the newsletter for more useful information delivered directly to your inbox. WP Plugins A to Z is a show that offers honest and unbiased reviews of plugins created by developers because you support the show. Help keep the show honest and unbiased by going to wppluginsa2z.com/donate and set the donation level that fits your budget. Help us make the show better for you by subscribing and reviewing the show at Stitcher Radio, Google Play, and in the iTunes Store. You can also leave us a review on our Facebook page using wppluginsa2z.com/Facebook. You can also watch the show live on YouTube, check out the screencasts and training videos, and remember to subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications of all new videos. Follow the show on Twitter at WPPluginsA2Z. John can also be reached at his website, johnoverall.com, or email him directly, john@wppro.ca. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the show. This show is copyright by johnoverall.com. So until next time, have yourselves a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be out there on the globe today. Cheers. It's tequila time. Ooh, that's rough. You all have a good night. Take care now. Bye-bye. Whew.